Millionaire CEO rescues desperate bride on highway. When he finds out who she really is, he's completely speechless. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Lucas Harper stepped out of the sleek glass-walled conference room in Monterey, letting the heavy door close behind him with a soft thud. Outside, the wind carried the briny scent of the Pacific, but he barely noticed. His mind was still tangled in the tense negotiation he had just concluded, an intense deal that would secure new patents for Harper Innovations. On paper, the meeting was a success, yet an unsettling emptiness gnawed at him, as if each contract he signed chipped away a little more of his spirit. He walked briskly down the corridor, nodding at a few associates who offered polite smiles. The modern office building overlooked a stretch of rocky coastline, the waves crashing against the cliffs in steady rhythm. Most people would pause to appreciate such a breathtaking view. Lucas, however, felt only a distant pang of longing. He missed the days when he could stand still and let nature's beauty calm him. Now, life was about numbers, deadlines, and closed-door bargains that left him feeling perpetually on edge. His phone vibrated in his jacket pocket. He glanced at the caller ID, Sarah Blake, his longtime executive assistant. Pressing accept, he placed the phone to his ear. "Hey, Sarah," he said, stepping into a quieter hallway. "Lucas," came her familiar voice, professional yet warm. "I just wanted to check in. How did the negotiation go?" "Well enough," he replied. "We got the licensing terms locked in." "That's great," she said, then hesitated. "And how are you?" He paused, leaning against the wall. Anyone else asking that question would have irritated him, but Sarah's concern was genuine. "I'm fine," he answered, though the subtle sigh in his tone betrayed something deeper. "Fine," Sarah repeated softly, as though unconvinced. "I'll see you back in San Francisco tomorrow, then." Lucas ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. Fine. That was what he always told people, even when the nights felt endless, and he wondered if he'd become a stranger to his own emotions. He headed downstairs to the parking garage, mentally reviewing the string of upcoming meetings. He told himself he preferred it this way: no distractions, no complications. Work was all he needed. At least, that was the story he clung to. Sliding into the driver's seat of his charcoal-colored Audi, Lucas took a rare moment to reflect. His thoughts strayed to Mark Thompson, a name he hated bringing to mind. A decade ago, Mark had been more than just a friend. They were practically brothers, brainstorming startup ideas in a cramped dorm room, dreaming of conquering the business world together. Then everything imploded in a bitter conflict Lucas still replayed in his mind. He rarely spoke of it, but the old hurt festered like an unhealed wound. Determined not to revisit that betrayal, he gripped the steering wheel tightly and started the engine. Emerging from the parking structure, Lucas turned onto the Pacific Coast Highway. The sun had begun to set, painting the ocean with fiery streaks of orange and pink. It was the kind of evening made for strolls on the sand or romantic dinners overlooking the water, activities that once appealed to him long before he'd closed himself off. Now, each mile he drove seemed to stretch into a lonely horizon. He was due back in San Francisco later that night, but he decided to take a slower route along the coast, hoping the scenery would calm his restless thoughts. Memories of Mark flickered like ghosts, joined by other regrets. Ex-girlfriends, neglected friendships, a life so consumed by expansion and quarterly reports that he had little space for genuine connection. As the miles went by, Lucas found himself swallowing a wave of bitterness. Still, a flicker of honesty crept in, a faint recognition of how unsatisfied he truly was. Even as he solidified his position in the tech industry, a part of him craved something real, something that didn't hinge on legal clauses and profit margins. With each turn of the wheel, he felt an undercurrent of anticipation, a sense that change might be just around the bend, waiting to break the unrelenting solitude. Zoey Sterling ran her fingers along the lace trim of her wedding dress, carefully examining every delicate detail. Despite the gown's exquisite design, a faint unease stirred in her chest. She stood inside the elegant bridal suite at the Silverado Vineyards in Napa Valley, where sunshine streamed through tall windows onto rows of white chairs being arranged outside. Everything looked picture-perfect, from the floral arches to the pristine table settings. Yet Zoey couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. "Earth to Zoey," teased Chloe Martin, her best friend since college, who was hovering by the window. Chloe's wide as inquisitive eyes had been on high alert for weeks. "You good? You seem kind of far away." Zoey mustered a small laugh. "I'm just nervous. I guess it's normal, right?" She fussed with the veil pinned to her dark hair. At 33, she had expected to be brimming with excitement on her wedding day. Instead, her mind kept drifting to the quiet doubts she'd harbored for a while. Little things Mark Thompson said or did that made her wonder if she truly knew him. Chloe's eyes narrowed. "I guess jitters happen, but Zoe, you've been working on this wedding for only a few months. It all happened fast. Maybe too fast." Zoey glanced around at the venue's tasteful decor. She was an interior architect by trade, and Mark, charismatic and well-connected, had insisted on a grand event that would impress his circle of influencers. Initially, she'd been flattered by his enthusiasm and the security he offered. But as the weeks passed, she noticed subtle shifts in Mark's tone when they discussed their future. He never outright dismissed her ideas, yet he often steered conversations toward what he wanted, usually overshadowing her opinions. She forced a bright smile. "It's just pre-wedding anxiety. Everything will be fine once we say our vows." Chloe didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded and changed the subject to the honeymoon plans. Zoey welcomed the distraction. Mark had proposed an extravagant trip to Europe, promising to show her every romantic locale from Paris to Venice. The idea had initially thrilled her, but a tiny voice inside whispered that she'd be stepping into a life meticulously planned by Mark, with little room left for her own dreams. At that moment, the door cracked open and a frazzled wedding coordinator popped her head in. "Ms. Sterling, they're about to do a final walkthrough of the aisle. Do you want to join?" "Sure," Zoey replied. She and Chloe followed the coordinator along a corridor lined with family photos from the vineyard's history, a tasteful nod to local tradition. Outside, the air was warm and fragrant with grapevines. Rows of chairs faced a wooden arch draped in flowers. Zoey took in the scene, her designer's eye appreciating the matching color scheme Mark had insisted on, soft creams and subtle golds to mirror the winery's tones. She tried to picture herself walking down the aisle, seeing Mark waiting under that arch. A wave of uncertainty rolled through her stomach. She breathed in slowly, telling herself it was just the magnitude of the moment. Chloe whispered, "Don't forget to eat something today. I brought snacks in my purse, just in case." Zoey managed a grateful grin. "Thanks, Mom," she teased. Yet beneath their playful banter, Zoey felt her pulse quicken. She envisioned Mark's confident smile and recalled all his assurances that this was the right path. He had introduced her to important people in his network, bragged about how talented she was in interior design, and boasted that together they'd be unstoppable. So why did she feel like a prop in someone else's grand production? As the coordinator discussed seating arrangements, Zoey nodded politely, but her mind drifted to the fleeting looks of concern Chloe had sent her way. Maybe it was just wedding jitters, she told herself. After all, she was about to marry a man admired by so many. Surely, that should be reason enough to feel blessed. Still, an undercurrent of doubt rippled beneath her composure, hinting that her life was about to be upended far more than she ever expected. Late that evening, Zoe found herself alone in her Napa loft, perched on a stool at the small kitchen island. Open floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the distant glow of vineyard lights. She wrapped a light sweater around her shoulders, though the chill she felt had nothing to do with the temperature. Mark was scheduled to arrive the next morning to finalize some wedding paperwork. Yet his last text message had been cold, practically a one-word response about the schedule. Zoe scrolled through their chat history, noticing a pattern of brief, almost dismissive replies. Gone were the days of enthusiastic calls or sweet voice notes. She blinked, trying to rid herself of negative thoughts, reminding herself that wedding stress hit everyone differently. Across from her, a half-empty takeout container of pasta sat ignored. She poked at it with a fork, her appetite absent. In her mind, bits of conversation from the past few months floated to the surface, especially Mark's repeated insistence that she leave most major wedding decisions to him. He'd told her it was for her benefit, so she wouldn't be overwhelmed. At first, it sounded considerate, but in hindsight, it felt more like he was controlling every detail, right down to which florist she should choose. Her phone buzzed. Hoping it was Mark with a reassuring message, she picked it up. It was Chloe. "Hey," Zoe answered, her voice slightly strained. "Just wanted to check in," Chloe said. "You doing okay?" "I know tomorrow is busy." Zoe hesitated before replying. "I think so, just feeling off. Mark's been distant. I'm trying not to read too much into it." Chloe sighed on the other end. "Remember when I asked if you were sure about all this? I wasn't trying to be a downer. You've known Mark less than a year. You two jumped into engagement so quickly." "I know," Zoe said, spinning the fork in her hand. "But it felt right at the time. He swept me off my feet. He made me believe we were soulmates or something." She tried to recall the sparkle in Mark's eye when they first met, how he championed her design work to high-profile clients, boosting her confidence and profile. Lately, though, that supportive charm had morphed into subtle criticisms. He'd question her decisions and imply she wouldn't get anywhere without his guidance. The shift had been gradual, but in the quiet of her loft, she could no longer pretend it wasn't there. After hanging up with Chloe, Zoe opened her laptop. She remembered Mark had once used her computer for some business emails months ago. It occurred to her that certain files might still be saved in her documents folder. Curiosity nudged her. Maybe she'd find something that reassured her he was still that caring fiancé she thought she knew. Instead, she found only receipts for expensive dinners Mark had charged to a corporate card, plus a cryptically named folder with a password. Feeling unsettled, Zoe closed the laptop. She stared at her engagement ring, its diamond catching the overhead light. It was beautiful, exactly the type of ring Mark believed would impress his peers. She slipped it off for a moment, rolling it between her fingers. The weight of it felt heavier than it should. A knock on the door startled her, and she nearly dropped the ring. Rising, she opened the door to see a florist delivering extra centerpieces Mark had ordered without telling her. They were over-the-top arrangements, reeking of extravagance. "Just sign here," the delivery person said. Zoe complied, quietly overwhelmed. As she set the flowers on the counter, she realized how little input she'd truly had on what was supposed to be one of the most important events of her life. Staring at the grandiose bouquets, she found herself breathing unevenly. Maybe Chloe was right. Maybe she'd been swept up in a whirlwind. Uncertainty lingered like a dull ache, and for the first time, she wondered if she was on the verge of making the biggest mistake of her life. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of the same Napa loft, illuminating the swirl of dust motes in the air. Zoe hadn't slept well. Even the aroma of fresh coffee failed to lift her spirits. She stood by the counter, her hands wrapped around a warm mug, waiting for Mark to arrive so they could drive to the final dress fitting together. When he finally walked in, Mark's greeting was curt, his eyes flicking around the space. "You're not ready yet." "We're running late," he remarked, glancing pointedly at his expensive watch. Zoey felt her stomach clench. "It's only 9. The appointment's at 10. We have plenty of time to make it." His gaze pinned her in place. "I told you I wanted to get there early. We have details to finalize." He didn't bother to kiss her hello. Instead, he strode across the living area, scanning for any sign of disarray. Zoey noticed his jaw tighten when he saw the extra flowers delivered last night, as though he was double-checking if she'd messed anything up. She tried to brush it off, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves before hurrying to gather her purse and keys. The drive to the bridal shop was tense. Mark barely spoke, save for a few clipped comments about the traffic and how important it was not to make a bad impression on vendors. Zoey stared out the window at the neat rows of vineyards, recalling how excited she'd once been to share a life with him. Now, the future felt like walking on eggshells. Upon entering the atelier, an elegant older woman named Mrs. Rivera greeted them warmly. "Mrs. Sterling, so good to see you again. Your gown is almost ready for a final check." Her smile wavered when she noticed the rigid air between Zoey and Mark. Mark offered a thin smile. "We're on a tight schedule, so let's get started." Zoey stood on a small pedestal as Mrs. Rivera arranged the gown around her. The heavy satin and lace felt oppressive today. She tried to focus on the mirror's reflection, telling herself that everything would be perfect once the ceremony began. But every time she glimpsed Mark's reflection, arms folded, foot tapping, her anxiety spiked. The tension escalated when Mrs. Rivera mentioned a minor adjustment to the train. "We might need an extra day to make it drape perfectly," she suggested. "Absolutely not," Mark cut in. "The wedding is this weekend. There's no extra day." Zoey caught Mrs. Rivera's unsettled glance and mumbled, "I'm sure we can figure something out." After the fitting, Mark pulled Zoey aside, his grip on her elbow uncomfortably firm. "Why didn't you stay on top of this?" he hissed. "We can't afford mistakes." She winced, trying to free her arm. "It's not a mistake. These things happen. It's a normal part of—" "Don't argue," he snapped, releasing her arm with a small shove. "You're so preoccupied with your feelings that you're not even handling wedding details right." Her heart pounded, and she rubbed the spot on her arm where his fingers had dug in. A swirl of conflicting emotions overwhelmed her. Anger, fear, shame. She desperately wanted to believe this was a one-time lapse, that Mark was just under immense stress, but the voice in her head reminded her that this was not the first time he'd been rough or callous. "Let's just go," she said quietly. On the way out, Mrs. Rivera gently asked if Zoey was okay. Zoey forced a tight smile. "I'm fine, really," she answered, echoing the word that had become her default response. In the car, Mark focused on his phone, ignoring her entirely. Zoey gazed at the bruise forming on her arm, hidden beneath the sleeve of her jacket. A dull sense of suffocation settled over her. If this was how he acted before the wedding, what would marriage look like? She tried to breathe, but the air felt thin, as if the entire world were closing in. Zoey's heart hammered against her ribs as she huddled behind a column near the back entrance of the Silverado Vineyards. She could hear the lively chatter of guests arriving for what they believed would be a grand celebration. Earlier that morning, she'd slipped into her wedding dress, preparing for hair and makeup, all the while battling an increasing sense of dread. Just minutes ago, everything had changed. Wandering through the venue's corridor in search of a quiet moment, she'd heard Mark's voice echo from behind a partially open door. Curiosity led her to pause, and then she'd caught every damning word. She heard him telling someone that once they were married, he could access her inheritance without any inconvenient legal obstacles. In a mocking tone, he dismissed Zoe's intelligence and made it clear this marriage was a strategic move for him. The final blow had been a sneering comment about how naive she was to trust him. Swallowing panic, Zoe had backed away, her pulse roaring in her ears. Everything felt surreal, as though the floor had cracked open beneath her feet. She almost couldn't comprehend the depth of Mark's deception or her own blindness. But then the sharp reality kicked in. If she walked down that aisle, she would be sealing her future to a man who saw her only as a means to an end. The voices of guests nearby jolted her into action. Desperate, she hurried down a side hallway in search of an exit. Now, crouched behind a column and hidden by tall, potted plants, she sucked in ragged breaths, trying to gather the courage to bolt. The crinoline and fabric of her wedding dress made her every movement cumbersome, but she ignored it, focusing only on the need to get out. She couldn't stay another second in this twisted charade. She peeked around the corner. One of the catering staff was propping open a service door. Perfect, she thought. She waited until he moved away to retrieve supplies, then dashed forward. Her white heels clacked on the tiled floor, but no one seemed to notice. Within moments, she was outside, the California sun beating down on her shoulders. The fresh air felt both liberating and terrifying. Zoe hurried across the back lot, ignoring the curious stares of a few workers unloading crates of wine. She could almost sense Mark's presence behind her, though she knew he was likely still inside, oblivious to her discovery. Glancing at the rows of parked cars, she realized she didn't have her keys or her phone. Panicked, she kept going until she reached the edge of the property, where a side gate stood open. Grapevines stretched into the distance, and beyond them, she glimpsed the highway. Her satin skirts rustled as she stumbled onto the roadside, cars speeding by in flashes of color. Part of her wanted to run back for her belongings, anything to avoid facing the unknown so completely unprepared. But another, fiercer part of her insisted there was no turning back. Mark's betrayal had destroyed any illusions she'd clung to. This wedding, this entire day, was a sham designed to benefit him alone. A passing sedan honked, its driver gawking at the sight of a bride with tears streaming down her cheeks, standing in a swirl of dusty tulle. Zoe wiped her face and took several unsteady steps along the shoulder of the road. She had no plan, just the burning urgency to put as much distance between herself and Mark as possible. Suddenly, a wave of nausea and fear collided in her stomach. She placed a trembling hand on a guardrail to steady herself. The traffic noise roared in her ears, but she couldn't focus on anything except the fact that her world had been shattered minutes before she was supposed to say, "I do." One question pounded through her mind. Now what? She lifted her gaze toward the curve of the highway as the sun glinted off distant car hoods. Somewhere out there, she had to find safety, or at least a fighting chance to piece her life back together. Zoe's legs felt like jelly as she trudged along the dusty shoulder of the Pacific Coast Highway, her wedding dress fluttering in the coastal breeze. She was certain drivers zooming by had never seen a runaway bride quite like this. Her heart pounded, both from exertion and the lingering terror that Mark might be moments behind her. But as the minutes passed and no one came screeching to a halt, her desperation morphed into grim determination. She didn't know where she was going, only that she refused to go back. A distant engine rumbled. Glancing over her shoulder, Zoe saw a sleek grey Audi approach. The driver slowed, apparently assessing the surreal sight of a woman in a torn wedding gown on the side of a highway. Zoe tensed, her instincts torn between dread and relief. Maybe they would offer help, or maybe this was a friend of Mark's. She braced herself to run if necessary. The car eased to a stop a few feet away, hazard lights flashing. Zoe's pulse roared as the window slid down to reveal a man with dark hair, neatly trimmed, and an expression equal parts alarmed and concerned. "Are you all right?" he called, voice slightly raised over the hum of passing traffic. "Do you need help?" She swallowed hard, scanning the road behind her for any sign of Mark. Then she stepped closer, noticing the interior of the vehicle was spotless, smelling faintly of new leather. I'm not hurt," she managed, her voice trembling. "But I need a ride, anywhere away from here." The stranger's gaze fell upon her disheveled dress and the raw fear in her eyes. She looked more than startled, she looked petrified. "Okay," he said gently. "I'll pull farther off the road. Get in the passenger seat." Zoe exhaled a shaky breath. Though she hardly knew him, her gut told her this man wasn't a threat. She climbed in, her skirt tangling around her knees. When the door shut, the car became a haven of cool air and relative calm. "I'm Lucas," he said, offering the slightest hint of a smile. His grey eyes flicked to her bruised forearm. "What happened?" "I'm Zoe," she replied, voice tight. She ran a hand over her sweaty forehead. "Look, my wedding was supposed to happen today. But I found out something about my fiancé. Something awful. I had to leave." Her words tumbled out so quickly, she wasn't sure he could follow. Lucas gave a short nod, placing the car in park and turning to face her fully. "All right. I won't ask for details if you're not ready, but you're clearly shaken. Let me help." Glancing down at her dress, Zoe felt a wave of embarrassment. She looked ridiculous, and more than that, she was imposing this crisis on a total stranger. Yet she was equally relieved not to be alone. "Thank you," she whispered, a sudden lump in her throat. They exchanged few words as Lucas navigated the car off the main highway, heading for a quieter route towards Sausalito. With each mile, Zoe's breathing steadied, though her mind reeled. She pictured Mark's enraged face once he realized she had fled. The possibility of him finding her felt all too real. She had seen his temper up close. She couldn't risk letting her guard down. Not yet. Lucas broke the silence. "I'm guessing you don't have your phone or wallet." She shook her head, cheeks flushing. "No, I left everything behind. I just ran." He nodded, tapping a button on the steering wheel to call someone named Sarah, presumably his assistant. Zoe caught bits of their conversation. Lucas needed help preparing a guest house, ensuring privacy, no questions asked. Sarah's calm tone suggested this was out of the ordinary, yet she never hesitated. When the call ended, Lucas glanced at Zoe. "You can stay in my guest house for a while, just until you figure out your next move. It's secure, private." Zoe closed her eyes, overwhelmed by relief. "I don't know how to repay you. You don't even know me." His lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm not sure why," he said quietly. "But I can see you're in genuine trouble. Let me do what I can." A tear slipped down Zoe's cheek. She wasn't sure if it was from gratitude, fear, or the sheer exhaustion of the day's events. All she knew was that for the first time in hours, she felt a flicker of safety. Soft, instrumental music played from the car's speakers as Lucas navigated the twisting roads toward Sausalito. Night had fallen, and Zoe watched the headlights illuminate the winding highway, revealing brief snapshots of towering pines and rocky inclines. Every so often, she caught her reflection in the side mirror, a haunted figure in a wedding dress she no longer wanted to wear. Her mind churned over what she would tell Lucas. The silence between them had grown taut, loaded with unspoken questions. Finally, she cleared her throat. "You probably think I'm insane," she began softly. "Running away from my own wedding." Lucas shot her a quick glance. "I've seen worse things in business," he said dryly, trying to lighten the mood. "But no, I don't think you're insane. I think you're scared. Zoe fiddled with a loose thread on the bodice of her gown. I am, she admitted, her voice trembling. I overheard my fiancé, Mark, talking about using me. He wanted access to my inheritance. It's complicated, but I realized he was lying to me all along. She paused, hugging her arms against a shiver. If I stayed, I'd be trapped. Lucas seemed to register the name Mark with a slight wince, but he remained quiet as she spoke. When she finished, he exhaled. I'm sorry. Whatever he did, that's horrible. You don't deserve it. She swallowed. Thanks. The word felt inadequate compared to the whiplash of events churning inside her. A question nagged at her. Why had Lucas flinched at Mark's name? But she hesitated to pry. She was already imposing so much on him. They traveled another mile before Lucas indicated a turnoff. A series of narrow lanes led to a secluded property with a modern home perched against a hillside. Soft exterior lights revealed sleek architectural lines, and the faint glimmer of San Francisco Bay sparkled in the distance. Zoe sensed Lucas was someone of substantial means, yet his demeanor wasn't pompous. It was as if he wore his success quietly, with little patience for fanfare. He pulled the car around to a smaller detached structure. This is the guest house, he explained, cutting the engine. You'll have privacy here. I'll stay in the main house. Sarah, the woman on the phone, should be here soon with some essentials. Zoe followed him up a short walkway, the motion-activated lights flipping on. Her pulse throbbed with a mix of apprehension and gratitude. Stepping inside, she was greeted by warmth and understated elegance. An open-plan living area with soft grey furnishings, tall windows, and a minimalist kitchen. Immediately, she felt a rush of relief. It was the farthest thing imaginable from the chaos she'd left behind. Lucas gestured toward the bedroom. You can rest, shower, change. I'll see if Sarah brought suitable clothes or if we need to buy some tomorrow. Zoe blinked back unexpected tears. The day had been a hurricane of humiliation and fear, and now she was confronted with kindness. Thank you, she said, her voice wavering. Really? He inclined his head, then cleared his throat. Look, if you need something, call me on the intercom here, or just knock on my door over there. He pointed out a connecting path leading to the main house. No pressure. I just don't want you to feel alone. Alone. That word echoed in her mind. She had never felt more alone than during the past few hours. Now she at least had a place to catch her breath. I appreciate it, she whispered. Before either could say more, headlights swept across the windows. Moments later, the door opened to reveal a woman in a tailored blazer, holding a small duffel bag. Sarah, Lucas said, relief in his voice. Perfect timing. Zoe, this is Sarah Blake, my executive assistant and friend. Sarah's kind smile lit her face. Hi, Zoe. Nice to meet you. I'm sorry about your predicament. Here are some basics. Sweats, a t-shirt, toiletries. We'll figure out the rest later. Zoe managed a shaky nod. Thank you. Both of you? Lucas lingered a moment, his gaze dipping to the bruise on Zoe's forearm that she'd tried to hide. An unmistakable flash of concern clouded his eyes, but he said nothing more, stepping aside to let her pass. It was obvious that something about her situation shook him deeper than polite sympathy, and as exhausted as Zoe was, she couldn't ignore the sense that fate had led her to someone with his own guarded scars. The next morning, Zoe woke to muted sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, confusion washed over her. Then she remembered this was Lucas Harper's guest house, and her wedding day fiasco was not some fleeting nightmare. Tugging a borrowed sweatshirt around her shoulders, she padded into the living area where a cup of hot tea waited on the countertop. A small note beside it read, "Take your time. I'm around if you need me. Lucas? She sipped the tea, grateful for even these small acts of thoughtfulness. Outside, a crisp breeze rustled the trees, and she glimpsed a view of the bay through the glass. The setting looked peaceful, worlds away from the chaos left behind in Napa. Her gaze landed on her phone, which Sarah had retrieved from Mark's wedding venue that morning, an astounding show of resourcefulness. The device was now charging, loaded with missed calls and messages. Just the thought of reading them made Zoe's stomach churn. Before she could lose herself in dread, a soft knock came at the door. She opened it to find Sarah, bright-eyed, despite the early hour. "Hey," Sarah greeted softly. "How are you holding up?" Zoe mustered a grateful smile. "Better, I guess. Thank you for rescuing my phone." Sarah laughed lightly. "Oh, that... I had to do a little covert mission to find the bridal suite, but fortunately, no one was paying attention. Lots of frantic staffers realized a bride was missing, which, by the way, has created a whirlwind of gossip." Zoe winced. "I can imagine." Sarah stepped inside, gently closing the door. "Lucas asked me to bring you breakfast. Also, I wanted to check if there's anyone you need to call. Family, a close friend. Anyone worried about you?" The question tightened Zoe's chest. "My friend Chloe. She's probably frantic. She was my maid of honor. I'll text her soon." She paused. "What about Mark? Have you heard anything?" Sarah shook her head. "I haven't. But he's apparently telling people you had a meltdown and left him at the altar. He's doing everything possible to smear you. I doubt that story will hold if you choose to speak out, but it's something you should know." A knot formed in Zoe's stomach. She sank onto a nearby stool, hugging herself. "I can't believe how quickly he's twisting everything. It's like he wants to discredit me before I can expose him." With a reassuring hand on Zoe's shoulder, Sarah said, "He won't get far. People can sense when someone is lying, but we need a plan." "Do you have any proof of what Mark was doing? Bank statements, messages, anything that indicates he was after your inheritance?" Zoe thought of her laptop at home, the locked folder she never managed to open. "I'm not sure. There might be clues. I remember glimpsing some suspicious files once, but he's careful. He's so well connected." Her voice trailed off. Sarah offered a gentle smile. "You're not alone. Lucas has resources. He can help if that's what you want." Just then, a quiet shuffle announced Lucas's arrival. He poked his head in, looking slightly uneasy at intruding. "Good morning," he said. "I can come back later." Zoe gestured him in. "It's okay. Come on in." Sarah clasped her hands. "I was telling Zoe we should strategize. Mark is likely spreading false stories about her disappearance. We need to be proactive, or he'll destroy her reputation before she even has a chance to defend herself." Lucas nodded, arms crossed over his chest. "Agreed, Zoe. I know this is overwhelming, but trust me. I've seen how rumors can escalate. It might be wise to gather evidence, talk to a lawyer, at least consider your legal options. I know someone who could advise you discreetly." His tone was gentle, yet firm. Zoe's gaze flicked from Sarah's sympathetic expression to Lucas's steady resolve. For all she knew, Mark had begun using his contacts to track her down. Shivering, she whispered, "I'll do it. Whatever I have to. I just don't want him to find me." Lucas set his hand on the back of the couch, knuckles whitening. "He won't. We'll protect you." In that moment, Zoe realized she had allies. Unlikely ones, perhaps, but allies all the same. The sense of relief was almost dizzying. She exhaled, feeling the faintest glimmer of hope that maybe, with their help, she could reclaim control of her life. As twilight deepened over Sausalito, soft lamps inside the guest house cast warm pools of light across the floor. Zoe stood by the window, gazing at the glowing marina below. She still wore clothes Sarah had given her, leggings and an oversized sweater, which felt more comforting than any high-end outfit Mark had ever bought her. Outside, a faint fog rolled in, blurring the bright city lights across the bay. Her thoughts drifted to the locked folder on her laptop, to the bruise on her arm, to the alarm in Mark's voice when she overheard his plan. So much had changed in 24 hours. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Lucas entering with 2 mugs of tea. He offered one silently. "Thank you," she said, her voice subdued. She sipped, savoring the warmth on her tongue. The tension in her shoulders eased fractionally. Lucas settled on the nearby couch, gesturing for her to join him. She did, tucking her legs beneath her. After a long beat of silence, she began to speak. "You asked me earlier if I had any proof about Mark. Well, I'm not sure, but there's a password-protected folder on my laptop. He used my computer once for some business emails. I suspect it's his. If that's the case, maybe it holds incriminating details. I just have no clue how to unlock it." Lucas nodded slowly. "A good IT person might help. I have tech experts at Harper Innovations, off the record if necessary." He ran a hand through his hair, looking thoughtful. "But first, we have to get your laptop." "It's at your place," Zoe confirmed with a weary nod. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been gnawing at her since she mentioned Mark's name. "Earlier, you seemed to recognize him, Mark Thompson. Did you two know each other?" Lucas's jaw tightened. He stared into his mug as though searching for the right words. "Yes," he said finally. "We were close friends a long time ago, practically family. We even started a small venture together, back before I founded Harper Innovations. Then things went south. There were some shady financial moves. He sabotaged a major deal, and I lost investors. We severed ties. I haven't spoken to him in years." Zoe inhaled sharply. She had known Mark was no saint, but hearing Lucas confirm those traits from personal experience sent a chill through her. "I'm sorry," she managed. "He didn't mean to pry." Lucas shrugged, though his expression betrayed lingering hurt. "I thought I'd buried that part of my past, but hearing you say his name, I guess it threw me." They exchanged a look of mutual understanding, both aware that Mark's betrayal had shaped them in different but equally painful ways. Zoe fiddled with the edge of the sweater sleeve, voice hushed. "It's strange to think I almost married him, you know. For a while, he made me feel like I was the luckiest woman alive. But now I see how he systematically chipped away at my confidence. I feel foolish for not recognizing it sooner." "You're not foolish," Lucas said, his tone firm. "You trusted someone you cared about. That's not a crime." She swallowed against the lump in her throat. Despite the day's chaos, she felt a surprising sense of safety in Lucas's presence. His intensity was tempered by an undercurrent of compassion she hadn't expected from a powerful CEO. She wondered if he sensed the spark between them, an unspoken current that seemed to hum whenever they were close. Tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, Zoe ventured, "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped on the highway." Her cheeks warmed at the admission of vulnerability. Lucas glanced at her, something earnest flickering in his eyes. "Maybe we both needed a chance to face the past," he said quietly, "in different ways." They sipped their tea in comfortable silence, the city lights twinkling outside as the night deepened. In the hush, a fragile bond formed, one born of shared wounds and a tentative willingness to trust again. Neither spoke of romance, but the unspoken possibility hovered like a gentle glow, weaving a sense of hope into the darkness. Over the next 2 days, Zoe found her footing in the guest house. With Sarah's help, she arranged a plan to retrieve her laptop from her Napa loft without alerting Mark. Chloe, her best friend, had also been secretly contacted. Zoe's heart lifted when she finally heard Chloe's frantic voice on the line. "Oh my God, Zoe, do you have any idea how terrified I was?" Chloe practically shrieked, equal parts anger and relief. "I've been calling you non-stop!" "Mark has been telling everyone you had a meltdown. He's painted himself as the victim." Zoe winced. "I'm sorry. Hearing him talk about me like some pawn, I couldn't stay. Are you okay? Is he harassing you?" Chloe huffed. "He tried, claimed you stole family heirlooms. Total nonsense. Anyway, I told him if he contacts me again, I'll record every word. He's a piece of work." Relieved, Zoe pressed a hand to her forehead. "I'm safe now. Can you meet Sarah to get my keys and slip into my place? I need my laptop. It's urgent." "Absolutely," Chloe said. "I'll do anything you need. Just promise you won't disappear on me again." By late afternoon, a carefully orchestrated plan was in motion. Chloe retrieved Zoe's keys from Sarah in a busy cafe in downtown Napa, their quick meeting designed to avoid attracting attention. Chloe then drove to Zoe's loft, grabbed the laptop, and handed it off to a courier Sarah trusted. After several tense hours, the courier delivered the item to Lucas's Sausalito address, disguised in a plain box labeled with generic shipping details. When the laptop arrived, Zoe's stomach fluttered with a mix of nerves and anticipation. They gathered in Lucas's main living area, Sarah perched by the island countertop, Lucas leaning against the sleek, modern staircase, and Zoe sitting at the table with the laptop open. She typed her usual password, navigating to the mysterious folder. Sure enough, a prompt demanded a separate login. "I can ask one of my cybersecurity specialists to try bypassing it," Lucas offered, voice steady. "If Mark left anything incriminating, they'll find it." Zoe drew a slow breath. "Yes, let's do it. If we can confirm what he's up to, maybe we can stop him from telling more lies." A look of quiet admiration flickered across Lucas's face, as though he recognized her growing resolve. He placed a call to an IT associate, explaining the situation vaguely, citing suspicious files. Meanwhile, Sarah updated them on Mark's social media onslaught, posts carefully crafted to portray him as a wronged fiancé. Zoe scrolled through them on her phone, her chest tight with a mix of anger and sadness at how easily he bent public perception. Amid all the tension, a gentle ding signaled a text from Chloe, who had just finished her own online sleuthing. "Found old photos of Mark UX, heard rumors of controlling behavior but no proof. Let me know if I should talk to the ex." Zoe texted back a grateful thanks, touched by her friend's dedication. It seemed everyone in her circle was stepping up to fight back. While Sarah compiled lists of potential supporters who might vouch for Zoe's character, Lucas drafted an email introduction to a trusted attorney, Dr. Anya Sharma, who specialized in financial disputes and personal protection orders. Zoe observed them both, seasoned professionals calmly handling each step. She felt a swell of gratitude, though fear still lurked. Mark was cunning. If cornered, he might lash out even more viciously. That evening, Sarah departed to finalize her own tasks, leaving Zoe and Lucas in the softly lit living room. The air carried the faint scent of ocean salt from outside. Zoe sank into the couch, massaging her temples. "I never imagined my life turning upside down like this," she murmured. "I hate that I've dragged you into it." Lucas settled beside her, leaving a respectful distance. "You haven't dragged me anywhere. I chose this. Besides, Mark burned me too once upon a time. If helping you also helps me finally settle that score, then so be it." Zoe looked at him, the lamplight catching the honesty in his gaze. Even in the turmoil, a fragile connection bound them, something forged by adversity, yet carrying the promise of genuine friendship, if not more. She whispered, "Thank you." He nodded. "We'll see this through, Zoe. You're not alone." A faint sense of reassurance unfurled in her chest, for now it was enough to hold on to that promise and the hope that truth would prevail. Zoey felt her phone vibrate on the coffee table. At first, she didn't recognize the number, so she let it ring. But then she noticed the flurry of new texts, each more alarming than the last. Resting in the guest house's small living area, she tapped the screen, only to find screenshots forwarded by Chloe, accompanied by frantic voice notes. Reading the messages, Zoey's chest tightened. Mark had apparently wasted no time launching a campaign to discredit her. In social media posts, he implied she'd been suffering from an emotional breakdown and hinted at possible infidelities on her part. The subtext was unmistakable. Mark wanted everyone to believe that Zoey was unstable and prone to reckless behavior. One post read, "Wedding cancelled last minute. Some people can't handle commitment. Pray for her." The condescending tone made Zoey's skin crawl. She showed her phone to Lucas, who had just walked in with a file of paperwork. His jaw clenched as he read the posts. "He's trying to paint you as unhinged," Lucas said quietly, "and from what I'm gathering, he's calling in favors from his circle, trying to get them to spread the same story." Zoey sank onto the edge of the sofa. "He's good at this," she whispered. "If he keeps at it, people will believe him. It's so easy to make a runaway bride look irrational." Lucas set the paperwork aside, then gently placed a hand on Zoey's shoulder. "He'll weave whatever narrative he wants, but that doesn't make it true. We have our own evidence in the works. Once that password-protected folder is cracked, we'll have a counterattack. Don't lose hope." Yet she could feel her heart pounding with dread. Mark's cunning manipulation had cornered her, and she remembered all too well how convincing he could be. What if prospective clients believed his lies? Her reputation as a designer hinged on trust. People might assume she was too unstable to handle serious projects. Her mind spiraled with worries about her career, her friendships, even her credibility in court if it ever came to that. Sarah arrived moments later, phone in hand. "I just got off a call with Chloe. She says Mark is reaching out to mutual acquaintances, claiming Zoey owes him money for deposits and items he purchased. He's painting himself as the jilted fiancé who lost thousands." Zoey stood, anger heating her cheeks. "That's all twisted. He insisted on the expensive wedding. I never asked for any of that." Sarah nodded. "We know, but your circle doesn't. People love drama. And Mark's version is juicy. We have to push back somehow." Lucas crossed his arms, scanning the room as though plotting a strategy. "Let's focus on facts. We have bank statements showing how he used Zoey's name to secure certain wedding-related payments with questionable charges. Once Dr. Sharma sees all this, she can outline the best legal path." Zoey's phone buzzed again, a barrage of notifications from acquaintances wanting her side of the story. Anxious, she turned the phone face down on the table, the screen lighting up with each incoming message. "I can't keep up with this," she murmured. "He's so fast, and I feel like I'm constantly behind, cleaning up the mess he makes." Sarah exchanged a look with Lucas. "That's what Mark wants. He's keeping you on the defensive. The best approach might be to remain quiet until we have solid proof of his fraud. Then we unleash everything at once." Taking a shaky breath, Zoey nodded, though fear pulsed through her. "You're right. But seeing these lies spread is infuriating." She thought of the day she'd fled, the humiliating stares, the terror that drove her to stand on that lonely highway in a ragged wedding dress. Lucas took a seat beside her, his voice low. "You have to trust that the truth will find its way out. It might get worse before it gets better, but you're not facing him alone now." Despite the swirl of panic inside her, Zoey allowed his words to settle. She looked into his eyes, sincere, unwavering. She inhaled slowly, steadied by the realization that, for the first time, she was pushing back with a team. Mark's vicious attacks wouldn't break her this time. Something stronger than fear flickered in her chest. Resolve. Sarah's footsteps clicked across the polished hardwood as she entered Lucas's main house, carrying a laptop bag. Close behind her was a bespectacled IT specialist named Jason, whom Lucas had summoned discreetly. Zoey rose from the dining table, smoothing the hem of her borrowed t-shirt. The tension in the room was palpable. They were one step closer to unearthing whatever secrets Mark had hidden. "Jason, this is Zoey," Sarah introduced. "She's the one who needs help accessing a secured folder." Jason nodded politely. "Happy to help." "Let's see what we can do." They cleared space on the table, setting up cables and a portable drive. Zoey hovered anxiously, remembering how Mark once boasted about his skill at covering his tracks. Could Jason really crack Mark's digital fortress? Her hands trembled slightly when she typed her basic login. Then Jason took over, running specialized software. A flurry of code filled the screen, lines streaming too fast for Zoey to follow. While Jason worked, Lucas handed Zoey a folder. Preliminary statements from Mark's business dealings, some questionable finances that my contact uncovered, nothing conclusive yet, but it all points to irregularities. Zoey flipped through them, her eyes widening at the sheer scale of Mark's possible fraud. It wasn't just about her inheritance. There were suspicious payments and roundabout transfers to overseas accounts. Her breath caught. Had she nearly tied her life to a man who might be laundering money or worse? "Got a partial hit," Jason announced, drawing everyone's attention. "The encryption's robust, but I see references to multiple real estate deals. Some might belong to Mark or a shell company. Give me a bit more time." Zoey felt a flicker of excitement mixed with apprehension. This was the ammunition she needed to prove Mark's deceit. But with it came the painful realization that she had barely known the man she almost married. She stepped back from the screen, letting Jason continue, and tried to quell the swirl of emotions. Meanwhile, Sarah started drafting a timeline of events. When Zoey met Mark, their whirlwind courtship, evidence of controlling behavior, culminating in her dramatic flight. "It's important," Sarah explained, "because if Mark tries to sue or claim defamation, we'll have a coherent narrative to counter him." Zoey chewed her bottom lip. "I'm not looking for revenge. I just want him to stop ruining my name, and to make sure he can't do this to someone else." Lucas nodded, empathy in his gaze. "Exposing the truth is the only way. Once it's out there, his manipulative facade collapses." A soft chime on the laptop indicated Jason's software had made progress. He typed furiously, then said, "I'm in. Looks like it's a trove of PDFs, spreadsheets, even scanned documents with Mark's signature. Most are labeled with initials, maybe to hide the real parties involved. I'll start copying them to a secure drive so I can decrypt and organize them better." Relief washed over Zoey. "Thank you, Jason," she whispered, her throat tight. "You have no idea what this means." He gave a small smile. "I've done a lot of data recovery, but this is definitely one of the more interesting cases. I'll keep you posted." As he worked, Zoey joined Lucas by the kitchen island, where he poured 2 glasses of water. She accepted one, taking a slow sip. "If these documents show Mark was plotting to control my inheritance," Lucas finished her thought, "then we have leverage. People won't be as quick to believe his sob story." They fell quiet, the hum of Jason's software the only noise. Zoey felt a knot of anxiety unravel. She was still terrified of Mark's next move, but for the first time, she saw a clear path forward. Soon, she would have the tools to defend herself in court or in any public forum Mark chose. Perhaps she could salvage her reputation and maybe even build a more honest life, free from the illusions Mark had spun around her. Jason finally looked up with a confident nod. "Should have a summary by tomorrow. From what I'm seeing, there's plenty here to cause Mark real trouble." Zoe exchanged a glance with Lucas. Though the war wasn't over, they'd just won a pivotal battle. A current of determination coursed through her veins. No more panic, no more helplessness. She was done being Mark's victim. Morning sunlight slanted through the guest house windows when Zoe awoke to an urgent knock. She hurried to the door, pulse quickening, half expecting more bad news from Mark. Instead, Sarah stood there, phone in hand, eyes wide. Without a word, she handed the device to Zoe. An article was open on the screen, titled "CEO Rescues Bride in Danger on the Highway," accompanied by a grainy photo. Zoe's breath caught. Though the picture was slightly blurred, it clearly showed a man, Lucas, helping a woman in a wedding dress along the shoulder of a coastal road. The article's text speculated that the mystery CEO had intervened in a dramatic escape, though no names were confirmed. Nevertheless, the details matched her situation far too closely. The location near Napa, the approximate timing, the glimpse of a designer gown. "That blog has a reputation for sensational stories," Sarah said. "But it's gaining traction, being shared all over social media." Heat surged to Zoe's face. She scrolled through the article, reading rumors about a runaway bride who found refuge with a wealthy benefactor. Worse, the comment section exploded with theories about who the bride was. Some people defended her, others mocked her. A few guessed the CEO might be Lucas Harper, connecting vague dots from old corporate press releases. Lucas entered a moment later, having spotted Sarah's car outside. "What happened?" he asked, scanning their faces. Sarah handed him her phone, and Zoe watched his expression tighten. "So Mark must have tipped them off," Lucas muttered, jaw set. "Or someone with a camera phone snapped us at the highway and sold it to a gossip site. Either way, the story's out." Zoe clenched her fists. "This is humiliating. If Mark figures out you're involved, he'll spin this into something worse. He'll claim you're behind our breakup." Lucas's eyes flickered with anger. "He'll do whatever he can to tarnish both our reputations. We need to brace for that." Just then, Zoe's phone buzzed. A message from Chloe. "Have you seen the blog? Mark texted me, furious. He told me the CEO is Lucas Harper, and he's calling you a gold digger who manipulated him and then ran off with his rich ex-friend." Zoe swallowed. "It's only a matter of time before he blasts that on every platform he can. He'll tie it back to your past feud, Lucas, and claim this was all a setup." Lucas said nothing for a moment, staring out the window as if calculating the fallout. Sarah cleared her throat. "Well, if Mark's revealing your name, you can't just ignore it. We could release a statement, or gather more evidence and have Dr. Sharma handle it legally, so Mark can't keep spewing lies unchecked." Zoe rubbed her temples, a headache blooming. "I didn't expect my life to become a public circus." Lucas's tone softened. "I know, but we need a strategy. Hiding now won't do. We've got partial evidence from Jason that Mark's been committing fraud and misappropriation. If we put it out carefully, we can counter his narrative." Sarah nodded. "Dr. Sharma can help us time the release so it doesn't look like baseless accusations. Meanwhile, Zoe, you might consider giving a short statement to a reputable source. Keep it factual, no drama. That could undercut the gossip blog's influence." Emotion clashed within Zoe, fear of speaking out publicly, rage at Mark's deceit, and a strange sense of relief that she wasn't in this alone. She thought of how, on the day she fled, she'd been trembling by the roadside, convinced no one would believe her. Now, she had Lucas, Sarah, Chloe, and Jason all in her corner. The difference was profound. Gently, Lucas touched Zoe's shoulder. "I know this is hard. I'm speechless, really, about how low Mark is willing to go. But we'll manage it. You have people behind you." The sincerity in his gaze stirred something warm in Zoe's chest. Despite the swirl of chaos, a spark of determination glowed. "You're right," she murmured. "I won't let him twist this. If I have to face the public, then so be it." Sarah's phone chimed again, a flurry of notifications about the blog going viral. The headline repeated in Zoe's mind, "CEO rescues bride in danger on the highway." Even if it was a sensationalized take, it was true in a way she never anticipated. Lucas had saved her from a nightmare, and now, with the story out, he was risking his own reputation too. Gathering her resolve, Zoe stood straighter. "Let's handle this on our terms." Lucas gave a curt nod, steel in his voice. "Yes, no more letting Mark define the narrative. We're taking control." Later that afternoon, Zoe paced the length of the living room, her nerves fraying as she waited for Lucas to finish a tense phone call in his study. She caught only fragments through the partially closed door, mention of Mark's name and references to business partners with cold feet. The weight of what Mark's media blitz might do to Harper Innovations settled heavily on her shoulders. When Lucas finally emerged, his expression was grim. "Some investors are anxious about the rumors. They worry about negative publicity, potential lawsuits. If Mark claims I sabotaged him, they don't want to be caught in the crossfire." Zoe pressed a hand to her forehead. "I'm so sorry. This is all because of me." He shook his head. "No, it's because Mark is a master manipulator. He and I have our own unfinished business, and now he's dragging Harper Innovations into it." His voice trembled with barely contained frustration. "But we'll endure. I refuse to let him scare me into silence." The doorbell rang, making Zoe jump. Sarah hurried to answer, revealing a courier delivering a hefty envelope. She signed for it and returned, worry etched across her face. "Zoe, this is for you, from some law firm I don't recognize." Zoe's stomach twisted as she tore open the seal. Her eyes skimmed the formal language. Mark was accusing her of stealing valuable family jewelry, presumably gifted to her during the engagement. He wanted it returned immediately, or he threatened to pursue criminal charges. "This is insane," Zoe burst out. "He insisted on giving me those pieces for the wedding. I never took anything. Most of the jewelry was at the venue or in storage. He's just trying to bury me in legal threats." Sarah crossed her arms, anger burning in her gaze. "He's throwing everything at the wall, hoping something will stick. We have to bring Dr. Sharma in now, full force." Lucas agreed, pulling out his phone. Within minutes, they had Dr. Anya Sharma on speaker. The calm authority in her voice was like a lifeline. "Mark Thompson's claim is weak, especially if you have any evidence those items were gifts," she said. "We'll counterfile a request for an injunction against him, citing intimidation and possible fraud regarding your inheritance. Don't panic. This is classic abuser strategy. He's using the law as a weapon." Zoe sank into the couch, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. She had expected Mark to lash out, but seeing it materialize in official documents felt like a punch to the gut. "He's relentless." Lucas knelt beside her, placing a hand on her arm. "We knew he'd escalate. You have us, Zoe. We'll respond to every tactic he uses." She drew in a shaky breath and nodded. "I won't let him win. But it's terrifying, feeling like I'm fighting a phantom. He's everywhere and nowhere." Sarah's phone pinged with a new message. She read it, then looked up. "That blogger who posted the CEO Rescues Bride piece is doubling down. They've got a statement from an anonymous source, most likely Mark, saying Lucas manipulated you for revenge. They're painting you as a pawn in his vendetta." Zoe's eyes snapped shut. She could almost hear Mark's voice behind these accusations, confident, deceptive, determined to paint her in the worst light. "He's got no shame." Lucas raked a hand through his hair, tension stiffening his posture. "I'll release a formal comment soon, but let's get the new evidence from Jason. If we can prove Mark's financial crimes, that story will overshadow his lies. Unspoken questions weighed in the air. What if Mark isn't done? What if he tries something more personal, more damaging? Steeling herself, Zoey stood and squared her shoulders. Let him try. Let him accuse me of everything under the sun. He can't hide from the truth forever, especially once we go public. Lucas's grim resolve matched her tone. Exactly. He's gambling on our fear, hoping we'll crack. We just have to keep pressing forward. Yet a tightness coiled in Zoe's stomach, the echo of Mark's hold on her emotions. She realized that defeating him wasn't just about uncovering financial misdeeds. It also meant confronting the echoes of his psychological grip. A quiet but fierce determination ignited within her. She refused to let Mark's shadows rule her life any longer. Night settled over Sausalito in a hush of cool air and shimmering lights across the bay. Inside the guest house, Zoey stuffed clothes into a small duffel bag. Her heart hammered and tears blurred her vision. She couldn't keep dragging Lucas down, risking Harper innovations or any further scandal. If Mark wanted to spin a narrative of betrayal, she'd remove herself from the equation altogether. It was safer for Lucas, and maybe for her too. She crept into the living area, duffel slung over her shoulder. A wave of guilt pressed on her chest as she recalled how Lucas and Sarah had spent hours strategizing with Dr. Sharma that afternoon. Her departure would blindside them, but it felt inevitable. Mark's hostility grew by the hour, and she didn't want anyone else to pay the price for her mistake. As she reached the door, a soft click made her jump. Lucas stood there, his expression caught between alarm and hurt. "Zoey, what are you doing?" She glanced away, not trusting herself to meet his eyes. "I'm leaving. I can't keep letting you fight my battles." His brow furrowed. "Your battles are ours now. We agreed we'd face Mark together." She swallowed hard. "That was before he targeted your company. I can't let my mess drag you under. If I vanish, maybe he'll stop attacking you." Stepping closer, Lucas placed a hand on the doorknob, preventing her from pulling it open. "You think fleeing will help? Mark will just spin a different angle. He'll say you disappeared because you're guilty or because I forced you out. It won't fix anything. It'll only weaken our case and put you at risk." Zoe's eyes brimmed with tears. She remembered how Mark once convinced her she was the problem, how he manipulated her into believing everything was her fault. That insidious doubt still haunted her, even after she'd run. "I'm tired of people getting hurt because of me," she whispered. Lucas exhaled, voice trembling with emotion. "Zoey, look at me." She lifted her gaze, and the raw concern in his eyes shook her. "You never caused any of this. Mark did. He'll twist reality no matter where you go. The only way to stop him is to stand your ground and fight. If you leave now, you give him what he wants, your silence." A choked sob escaped her throat. "I just don't want you to lose everything." His expression softened. "I've already lost plenty in my life. Money, trust, friendships, even my sense of self after Mark's betrayal. But I'm here, rebuilding, and right now, nothing matters more than doing the right thing. That includes helping you." She let her bag drop to the floor as tears slipped down her cheeks. She wanted so desperately to believe him, to stop feeling like a burden. "I'm so scared," she admitted, her voice wavering. Without hesitation, Lucas closed the distance between them, gently wrapping her in an embrace. The warmth of his arms and the steady beat of his heart offered comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. "I know," he murmured, "but you don't have to be scared alone." For a moment, she rested her head against his chest, letting the gravity of the day's events drain her energy. The swirl of emotions, from panic to reluctant hope, stirred inside her. She pulled back slightly, meeting his gaze. "I don't think I can do this by myself." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "You're not by yourself. You have Chloe, Sarah, Dr. Sharma, and, if you'll let me. The faintest smile tugged at her lips. She nodded, reaching for the duffel bag and setting it aside. Okay, I'll stay. Relief passed over Lucas's features. He guided her to the couch, where they both sat. We'll get through this. Tomorrow, we finalize the legal strategy with Dr. Sharma. If Mark escalates, we'll counter with evidence. And once we have everything locked down, we expose him. Zoey took a shaky breath, her mind spinning. Yet, in the midst of fear, she felt a spark of courage flare. She wasn't alone in the dark anymore. Leaning her head against Lucas's shoulder, she closed her eyes. Though anxiety lingered, a fragile sense of resolve blossomed. She would stay, fight, and reclaim her narrative from Mark's poisonous grasp. They sat in silence under the warm glow of a single lamp, and for the first time in days, Zoey felt a glimmer of peace, cradled by the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she was strong enough to emerge from Mark's shadow and step into her own light. Zoey stood in Lucas's spacious kitchen, arms wrapped around herself as she peered at the grey morning sky through the window. Despite the lingering tension in the air, there was no more room for hesitation. They had decided today they would escalate the counterattack against Mark. Huddled around the marble island were Lucas, Sarah, and Dr. Anya Sharma, who'd arrived earlier with a stack of legal documents under one arm. All right, Dr. Sharma began, placing her file on the island. We have enough preliminary evidence to file a formal complaint against Mark Thompson. There are potential charges related to financial manipulation, coercion, and if Zoey agrees, we can also pursue a restraining order. Zoey released a shaky breath. The words felt both terrifying and empowering. I want him legally cornered, she replied, voice quiet but resolute. He's using every channel he can to paint me as unstable. I need to stand my ground. Lucas reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. We'll do whatever's necessary. My PR team is on standby. Once Dr. Sharma files the initial paperwork, we'll schedule a brief media statement to clarify the facts. Dr. Sharma nodded. Yes, but keep it short. Don't overshare details that Mark can twist. We'll confirm you left the wedding due to discovering serious misconduct. No mention of specific documents until we finalize them as evidence. After that, his entire facade begins to crumble. Zoey felt a flutter of nerves. She pictured Mark's reaction once he realized they weren't passively hiding anymore. Ever since she'd run away, he'd held the upper hand with his relentless smear campaign. Today, that dynamic would change. I'm ready, she said, straightening her shoulders. They divided tasks. Sarah would draft talking points for the statement, Dr. Sharma would contact the appropriate authorities, and Lucas would coordinate with the PR team. Zoey's role was to prepare to speak publicly, something that made her stomach twist with anxiety. Yet as she glanced around at their determined faces, she knew this was the only path to reclaim her life. They worked for hours, scattered around Lucas's dining area and home office. Phone calls buzzed, laptops pinged, and papers rustled. The steady hum of collaboration gave Zoey an unexpected sense of calm. Every step brought her closer to being free from Mark's hold. Occasionally, her gaze drifted to Lucas, who paced near the window while on a call. His voice was firm and steady, negotiating with potential investors who worried about the controversy. Each time he hung up, he met her eyes, offering a slight nod that said, "We're in this together." By mid-afternoon, Sarah stood up, clearing her throat. Dr. Sharma got word from the courthouse. Our complaint is officially in the system. Mark will be served soon. Zoey swallowed. Served meant confrontation. Even if it happened through legal channels, Mark would realize his advantage was slipping away. She dreaded the possibility that his anger might drive him to do something desperate. Still, a quiet determination steadied her voice. Then we move forward with the statement. Sarah nodded. Yes, we'll keep it factual and short, as advised. A few outlets are already requesting interviews. You don't have to answer all of them, just enough to set the record straight. The final piece was a secure video call with Jason, the IT specialist, who confirmed the incriminating data from Mark's hidden folder was properly catalogued. We're nearly done labeling each document, he explained. We'll hand everything to Dr. Sharma. It's substantial, enough to prove Mark's been siphoning money from multiple deals. Relief washed over Zoey, mingling with adrenaline. Thank you, Jason, she said softly, ending the call. Now, there was no turning back. This was the first real strike against Mark, one that would expose him to legal repercussions and public scrutiny. Zoe's heart thudded in her chest as she imagined him opening that official envelope, realizing she was no longer cowering in the shadows. When evening fell, they paused to eat a quick dinner. Zoey found herself too keyed up to taste much of the food. Her mind buzzed with the enormity of what lay ahead, but for once, she wasn't paralyzed by fear. She was galvanized by purpose. Lucas caught her eye from across the table. With a gentle smile, he said, "We fight now, so you can truly live after this." Zoey felt her lips curve into a tremulous but genuine smile. "Yes," she whispered, "it's time to fight." The next afternoon, Zoey stepped off an elevator into the sleek lobby of Dr. Anya Sharma's law firm, her pulse hammering. A swirl of nerves and determination coursed through her. She clutched a folder of documents that proved her claims, bank statements, screenshots, emails. Lucas walked beside her, dressed in a dark suit, jaw set with resolve. In the reception area, Dr. Sharma greeted them briskly. "He's here. Mark arrived with his lawyer 5 minutes ago." "Are you both ready?" Zoey nodded, though her palms dampened at the prospect of facing Mark again. It had been days since she'd last seen him. Days filled with fear, anger, and an awakening sense of self-worth. She stole one more glance at Lucas, who offered a reassuring smile, then followed Dr. Sharma into a spacious conference room. Mark Thompson stood at the far end, wearing his trademark tailored suit. Even from a distance, Zoey felt the weight of his glare. His lawyer, a stiff-looking man in glasses, whispered something in his ear, but Mark's gaze remained locked on Zoey. The tension crackled in the air. Dr. Sharma spoke first, her tone clear and authoritative. "Thank you both for agreeing to meet. My client, Mrs. Sterling, has brought forth claims regarding financial manipulation, coercion, and potential fraudulent activities connected to Mr. Thompson. We're here to present preliminary evidence and discuss potential resolutions." Mark's lawyer cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "Let's not jump to conclusions. My client categorically denies any wrongdoing. As for Ms. Sterling's sudden departure from the wedding, we have reason to believe there were personal issues." Zoey refused to let him spin the narrative. "I left because I discovered Mark intended to marry me solely to access my inheritance. I overheard his call," she said, voice trembling with controlled anger, "and I have documents from his private folder that implicate him in multiple dubious transactions." She slid a copy of the relevant documents across the conference table. Mark's jaw tightened, eyes flicking to the papers. For a split second, uncertainty passed over his face before he smoothed it into a cold mask. "This is nonsense," he said, his tone dripping with derision. "How dare you hack my private files? I'll press charges for invasion of privacy." Lucas leaned forward, his own frustration cracking through. "Those files were on Zoe's laptop, not yours. And if you want to talk about charges, maybe start with your attempts to blackmail her into returning family jewelry that was never stolen in the first place." A vein throbbed at Mark's temple. His lawyer intervened. "But Dr. Sharma cut him off, sliding another set of exhibits across the table. Our forensic analysis confirms the funds in question were diverted through shell companies tied to Mr. Thompson. We have bank statements, signatures, and timestamps. Explain that. Mark scanned the pages, fury etching lines across his forehead. For an instant, Zoey saw the truth flash in his eyes. He was cornered, but he quickly forced a mocking laugh. You think some half-baked paperwork will hold up in court? You know how easily documents can be fabricated. Maintaining composure, Dr. Sharma spoke calmly. We have verified these documents through professional auditors, and there is a journalist waiting for a statement, someone who's been investigating similar allegations against you. Unless you agree to stop your defamation campaign and address these concerns, the story will go public. Zoey sensed the atmosphere shift. Mark's confidence wavered, replaced by desperation. She remembered that desperation from their final days together, when he realized his grip on her was slipping. A bitter taste filled her mouth as she recalled the bruise he left on her arm. His lawyer tugged his sleeve. We should discuss privately, the man said under his breath. Mark shot a venomous look at Zoey, then turned abruptly, stepping away for a hushed conversation in the corner. Zoey exhaled shakily. Lucas placed a gentle hand on her back. You're doing great, he murmured. She nodded, heart pounding. This was the moment she dreaded and prepared for. No matter what Mark tried next, she had shed her old fear, standing firm on her truths. When Mark returned to the table, his face was a rigid mask. He all but snarled, "This meeting is over. We'll see you in court. And if you so much as breathe a word of these false documents to the press, I'll make sure you regret it." He spun on his heel, his lawyer trailing behind. The conference room door slammed, the echo lingering in the stunned silence. Dr. Sharma sighed. As expected, he's refusing to negotiate. Zoey steadied herself. Then we go public. Expose it all. Lucas stood resolute at her side, voice low and determined. He asked for a fight. He just got one. Only a day after the tense meeting, Zoey sat in a quiet alcove of Lucas's living room, scanning her phone in disbelief. The journalist Dr. Sharma contacted had published a detailed report on Mark's alleged fraud, supplemented by the evidence they'd provided. The story spread across multiple outlets. Mark's pristine public image now had a glaring crack. At first, Zoey felt a sense of grim satisfaction, validation that she wasn't crazy or vindictive, simply revealing the truth. But satisfaction quickly gave way to an unsettling heaviness. The article included her name, and her face was plastered in some of the pictures. She found herself targeted by online trolls. Strangers called her everything from a gold digger scorned to a brave whistleblower. The polarity of public opinion stung. She set her phone aside, shoulders slumping. The price of truth was higher than she'd imagined. She was determined to stand by it, yet the scrutiny from both supporters and critics felt overwhelming. Was it worth it? A gentle knock on the open door startled her. Sarah slipped in with a sympathetic smile. "How are you holding up?" Zoey mustered a half smile. "I'm all right, I think. Just not used to my personal life being dissected by people who've never met me." Sarah nodded. "I know, it's a lot. But remember, you did this to regain control. Mark wanted to silence you, but now the world knows who he really is." Zoey appreciated the reminder. "Thank you. I needed that." Before Sarah could reply, Lucas appeared in the doorway, looking concerned. "Zoey, a reporter from a reputable business magazine wants an on-the-record statement about Mark's manipulations. Dr. Sharma suggests we do it, but only if you're comfortable." The thought made Zoey's pulse flutter. Another interview meant more public exposure, but she recalled the vow she'd made not to let Mark define her story anymore. "Let's do it," she said quietly. "I'll set the record straight, in my own words. An hour later, Zoe found herself in the main house's office, facing a video call with a neatly dressed reporter. Lucas sat nearby, out of the frame, while Sarah hovered behind the camera to monitor the conversation. Zoe took a calming breath as the reporter greeted her warmly, then launched into questions about Mark's alleged wrongdoing. At first, Zoe's voice quivered. She was terrified of saying something Mark's lawyers could twist, but as she described her experience, how Mark cultivated her trust, how she discovered his plan to seize her inheritance, a kind of clarity emerged. She realized that telling her story was also an act of reclaiming her dignity. When the reporter asked, "What would you say to people who question the timing of your discovery?" Zoe felt a pang of hurt, recalling how close she came to marrying him. "I wish I'd found out sooner," she admitted, "but emotional manipulation is subtle. It can happen to anyone. My only regret is not listening to my gut earlier." Afterward, the reporter thanked her for being forthcoming. The call ended, and Zoe slumped back in the chair, emotionally drained, yet a spark of relief glimmered inside her. She'd spoken her truth in a measured, confident way. Lucas set a hand on her shoulder. "You were brave," he said simply. Zoe managed a tired smile. "It feels like the right thing, even if it's exhausting." Later that evening, as she scrolled through emerging headlines, she noticed a shift in the narrative. More stories questioned Mark's business ethics, referencing insider accounts of shady deals. Zoe's name appeared less frequently as a runaway bride and more as a key figure exposing corporate misconduct. The cost was high. Her privacy was virtually gone. But for every hateful comment online, there were 2 or 3 supportive messages, some from people who'd escaped manipulative relationships themselves. Staring at the screen, Zoe realized the price she paid for truth was steep, but not too steep for her sense of freedom. The humiliating shame she once felt had begun to lift, replaced by a determined resolve to see this battle through to the end. And for the first time since her frantic dash from that Napa vineyard, she felt she was no longer defined by what Mark tried to do to her. She was becoming something new, someone who demanded honesty and deserved it in return. Sunlight glimmered over the bay, pouring through the guest house's tall windows as Zoe zipped up a light jacket. She'd begun taking early morning walks along Sausalito's waterfront, a small ritual to clear her mind and reclaim a sense of normalcy. The crisp air and gentle sway of the tide helped her shake off the weight of the public scrutiny she'd been under. This morning, she felt a different kind of energy, almost buoyant. The last few days had been tumultuous, but the evidence against Mark was solid. Public perception was slowly turning in Zoe's favor, and Dr. Sharma was confident that legal proceedings would follow. Mark had gone uncharacteristically silent, likely preparing for a prolonged fight. Yet, ironically, his silence offered Zoe the emotional space to breathe and refocus on her own life. After her walk, she returned to the guest house, where the smell of brewing coffee greeted her. Sarah, who'd stayed overnight to keep helping with logistics, stood in the tiny kitchen area. "Good morning," Sarah greeted with a hopeful look. "You seem lighter today." Zoe nodded, dropping her keys on the counter. "I think I actually slept without nightmares. That's a milestone." Over the next hour, Zoe delved into design sketches she'd almost forgotten about during the chaos. Before meeting Mark, she'd been an ambitious interior architect, driven by a desire to create thoughtful, welcoming spaces. She'd lost sight of that passion, drowning under Mark's shadow. Now, scanning her old portfolio, she felt a spark of excitement. Why not resurrect her career on her own terms? Buoyed by the idea, she ventured to the main house to share her thoughts with Lucas. She found him on the back deck, laptop open, gazing out at the water between emails. He offered a warm smile as she stepped outside. "You look good. Rested." She explained her idea to restart her design business under a fresh name, maybe Sterling Designs, and pick up smaller projects at first. "I don't want to wait around for Mark's legal meltdown to define my future," she said, fiddling with a pen in her hand. "I need to reclaim that part of me." Lucas leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "You absolutely should. You have an incredible eye for design, Zoe. If you need investors or networking, I can introduce you to people, though only if you want that. I know you're aiming for independence." Touched by his offer, Zoe smiled. "I appreciate it, but let me see if I can stand on my own feet first. I want to prove to myself that I'm capable." He nodded in understanding. "I get it, but remember, help is there if you need it. No strings attached." They spent the next half hour talking through her business plan, a sense of renewed purpose fueling Zoe's words. She realized how drastically her perspective had shifted, from being a frightened, runaway bride to a woman determined to forge her own path. The transformation felt fragile but exhilarating, a rebirth of sorts. Later, Sarah joined them with updates from Dr. Sharma about the case. "Mark's lawyer has filed motions for extension," Sarah reported. "They're dragging their feet, probably hoping something will surface that undermines our claims." "But so far, nothing." Zoe braced herself against the deck railing. "That means we might be in for a drawn-out process, right?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, but your position is strong. Witnesses are coming forward with stories of Mark's underhanded tactics, and the press is losing interest in his sob story. They're more intrigued by the fraud angle now. Though the road ahead promised more legal hurdles, Zoe felt an anchor of calm inside her, an assurance that she would handle it, no matter the delay. For too long, she'd let Mark's manipulations overshadow her identity. Each small step toward reclaiming her dreams was a victory. As the sun climbed higher, Zoe thanked Sarah, then turned to Lucas. "I'm ready to start over," she said quietly. "And it's not just about my career, it's about how I see myself, as someone strong, not broken." Lucas's gaze warmed. "You are strong, Zoe. Sometimes we just need a fresh chapter to realize it." Her heart gave a little flutter. The future remained uncertain, but it was hers to shape now. She felt reborn into a world where fear no longer dictated her decisions. And for the first time, that world glowed with promise. A gentle breeze stirred the papers spread across the outdoor table, where Zoe and Sarah were finalizing a short presentation for Zoe's fledgling design firm, Sterling Designs. They had decided on a simple but tasteful logo, a sleek website landing page, and a handful of portfolio highlights that showcased Zoe's flair for transforming spaces. Each new step bolstered her confidence. "Everything looks cohesive," Sarah remarked, scrolling through the mock-up on a tablet. "Clients will see you're polished and serious about this." Zoe beamed, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. "I'm excited. No matter how small the first projects might be, at least I'll be earning my way, not someone else's idea of who I should be." They heard footsteps on the flagstone path, and Lucas appeared, wearing a subtle grin. He carried 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "Thought you two could use a toast," he said, handing them out. "To Sterling Designs and new beginnings." "Thank you," Zoe said, touched by the gesture. They clinked glasses gently, and the bright fizz of the cider felt like a celebration of hope. Zoe found herself recalling the night she'd arrived in Sausalito, terrified, breathless, a bride on the run. It felt like a different lifetime. Lucas took a seat beside her. "So what's next on the agenda?" Zoe tapped her notebook. "I've got a potential client meeting next week, an acquaintance of Chloe's. It's just a small retail boutique, but it's a start." "Chloe's been super enthusiastic," Sarah added. "She's basically your unofficial publicist." Zoe laughed. warmth blooming in her chest at the thought of her loyal friend. Despite all the chaos, Chloe had stood firm by her side. Yeah, she's the best cheerleader anyone could ask for. Their attention shifted when Dr. Anya Sharma joined them, appearing from the main house with a stack of legal files tucked under her arm. I hope I'm not interrupting. I have some updates on Mark's proceedings. A current of tension swept the group. Zoe swallowed, bracing herself. Go on, she said quietly. Dr. Sharma set down her files. It seems Mark is negotiating with the district attorney's office in regard to potential fraud charges. He's trying to avoid a criminal indictment by offering restitution and partial admissions of wrongdoing. Meanwhile, the civil case we filed will proceed unless he agrees to a settlement. He's not getting off scot-free. Zoe released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That's good news, I think. It means he's finally cornered. Dr. Sharma nodded. He is, but he might still attempt to discredit you if the settlement negotiations fail. We must remain vigilant. On the bright side, his reputation is in shambles, and he's lost major business backers. Lucas's face was grave. If he tries any more stunts, he'll only dig himself deeper. I suspect this is the beginning of the end for Mark's facade. Zoe listened, a swirl of relief and lingering caution in her mind. I just want him out of my life, she said simply. She knew the legal process might take months, maybe longer, but at least the tide had shifted irreversibly. Dr. Sharma closed her folder with a decisive snap. He won't be able to harm your reputation further without serious pushback from the press, who are already skeptical of him. You've turned the narrative around, Zoe. In the hush that followed, a sense of closure loomed. Though not complete, it was tangible. Mark's downfall, while not fully sealed, was well underway. Zoe could breathe without the constant dread of his next move. After Dr. Sharma departed, Sarah checked her watch and excused herself, leaving Zoe and Lucas alone in the gentle afternoon light. He angled his chair closer, studying her face. You know, he said softly, you've shown incredible resilience. Starting your firm, standing up to Mark. It's inspiring to watch. A shy smile tugged at Zoe's lips. I never thought I'd say this, but the worst thing that happened, me running from that wedding, turned into an unexpected chance to discover my own strength. I owe so much to you, too. Lucas shook his head. You owe me nothing. I'm just grateful our paths crossed when they did. They shared a quiet moment, eyes locked. Zoe's heart fluttered. Memories of her fear and desperation were replaced by a calm certainty that she was walking her own path now, free of illusions. Rising from her seat, she glanced over the neat stack of design proposals. I'm still nervous, you know, about the next steps, about everything. Lucas stood as well, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. That's normal, but you're doing it anyway. That's courage. Zoe exhaled, letting a sense of hope permeate her. The storms with Mark weren't fully settled, but her direction in life was clearer than ever. She was charting new paths, forging ahead with the unwavering belief that she deserved honesty, dignity, and love built on truth. Zoe's footsteps echoed across the polished floor of a high-rise lobby in downtown San Francisco. Late afternoon sunlight streamed in through wide glass walls, revealing a bustling street scene outside. She clutched her presentation folder, grateful for the comforting weight of its contents. Today marked her first formal pitch under Sterling Designs, and though her nerves simmered, a fresh surge of confidence grounded her steps. She spotted Lucas standing near the reception desk, wearing a tailored suit and a supportive smile. He'd come to lend moral backing, not to overshadow her. Their eyes met, and she felt a gentle wave of reassurance flow between them. "Ready?" he asked softly as she joined him. She nodded, inhaling the scent of her newly printed design boards. More than ready. A friendly assistant soon guided Zoe into a spacious conference room filled with warm light. The prospective client, a poised woman named Mrs. Henderson, greeted her politely. Zoe noted the impeccable decor, sleek lines, understated sophistication. She took it as a hint that Mrs. Henderson appreciated tasteful, modern touches, just Zoe's style. She launched into her presentation, unveiling slides of her previous work and sketches for a proposed renovation. Her voice trembled only slightly at the beginning, but as she spoke, passion took over. She described her vision for creating an inviting yet functional space, carefully blending Mrs. Henderson's personal aesthetic with timeless design elements. Lucas observed from a discreet distance, arms folded, pride evident in his gaze. For weeks, Zoe had prepared for this pitch, late-night brainstorming, color palette experiments, and layout revisions. She was determined to prove she could stand on her own, free from Mark's sabotage or overshadowing influences. When she finished, Mrs. Henderson tapped her chin thoughtfully. "This approach is quite elegant, Miss Sterling. I appreciate the individualized touches, the way you incorporate natural light, the custom shelving to maximize space." She paused, a curious twinkle in her eye. "Forgive me, but I must address what I've seen in the news. You've been involved in a public dispute with Mark Thompson." Zoe's heart clenched briefly. She recalled the articles linking her name to Mark's scandal. Yet, she squared her shoulders, meeting Mrs. Henderson's gaze calmly. "I understand your concern," she began. "Mr. Thompson and I were once engaged, but I ended it upon discovering serious misconduct on his part. Legally and personally, I've separated from that situation. If you have any worries about my professionalism, I'm more than willing to provide references from clients and partners." Her voice stayed steady, a testament to how far she'd come. Mrs. Henderson nodded, seeming satisfied. "I admire your candor. Talent aside, honesty is vital in my book." With that, she extended a hand. "I'd like to work with you, Ms. Sterling. Let's finalize the details this week." Surprise and relief flooded Zoe. She accepted the handshake, blinking back grateful tears. This moment, her first official contract, felt like a definitive turning point, a confirmation that Mark no longer controlled her narrative. After a round of cordial farewells, Zoe and Lucas stepped onto the bustling sidewalk. The city pulsed around them, with the hum of traffic and pedestrians. Zoe gripped the folder containing her new contract, her heart lighter than it had been in ages. Lucas broke into a wide grin. "You nailed it! Congratulations!" She exhaled, laughter spilling forth. "I can't believe it. For a second, I thought the Mark question might derail everything." He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, an affectionate gesture that felt more natural each day. "It's a testament to your resilience. People see genuine talent, and they recognize your integrity." They walked a few steps in comfortable silence, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the pavement. Zoe couldn't stop replaying the pitch in her mind, marveling at how she'd managed to stand tall and speak with unwavering conviction. The fear she'd once carried around like chains had loosened its grip. "Thank you for coming today," she said, glancing at Lucas. "I know you didn't have to." He shrugged lightly. "I wanted to, supporting you. It feels right." Zoe felt warmth blossom in her chest. The truth was, she could handle life on her own now, but sharing victories with Lucas made them that much sweeter. Together, they'd confronted Mark's darkness. Now, in the golden San Francisco light, it felt as though an entirely new chapter had begun, rooted in honesty, anchored by genuine respect, and fueled by a shared hope for the future. That evening, Zoe returned to the guest house with buoyant energy. Every step reminded her of the accomplished pitch, the signed contract in her folder, and the sense of renewal coursing through her veins. The space where she once cowered from Mark's looming threats now felt like a genuine home, even if it wasn't technically hers. After slipping off her flats, she stood at the living room window, gazing out at the Bay Bridge in the distance. The city lights winked like scattered fireflies over the water. She inhaled slowly, appreciating the simple act of breathing without fear, knotting her chest. A soft knock on the door drew her attention. Lucas stood there, wearing a slight grin. "I come bearing gifts," he joked, holding up 2 takeout bags. "Thai food, courtesy of Sarah's recommendation. She said you love Pad See You." Zoe's stomach fluttered, half in hunger, half in delight. "You remembered," she said, stepping aside to let him in. They spread the containers on the small dining table. Aromatic scents of basil and spices filled the guest house. For a while, they ate in companionable silence, the day's tension melting into the comforting ritual of shared food. Zoe relished how ordinary it felt. No looming deadlines, no crises, just 2 people grateful for each other's presence. Eventually, Lucas set down his fork, observing her with thoughtful eyes. "I've seen you transform these last few weeks, facing Mark head-on, launching Sterling designs. It's like you're finally free." Zoe let out a soft laugh. "It does feel that way. I can't deny the legal proceedings are still ongoing, but I'm not afraid anymore. I can thank you for a lot of that." He shook his head. "You found that strength on your own. I just helped clear some obstacles." A wave of emotion welled in Zoe's chest. She recalled the night she almost fled the guest house, convinced she was saving Lucas from Mark's wrath. Now she saw how that moment crystallized her path forward, staying, fighting, believing in her own worth. Pushing her plate aside, she reached across the table to cover Lucas's hand with hers. "You know, I'm used to people taking from me, my ideas, my energy, my trust, but you've given me the space to be myself, to make my own decisions, and that means more than I can say." He turned his palm upward, threading their fingers together. "It goes both ways, Zoe. I've spent years hiding behind work, staying guarded because of old betrayals, including Mark's. You reminded me life can be deeper and more real than a string of business deals." Her heart pounded, warmth radiating between them. The atmosphere shifted, intimacy drawing them closer. She rose from her seat and moved around the table, drawn by the compelling softness in Lucas's expression. Standing beside him, she placed a hand on his shoulder. In a quiet rush of courage, Zoe leaned in. Their lips met gently, the sweet culmination of all the unspoken feelings they'd been dancing around for weeks. A tingling current passed through her, vibrant yet calm, like everything was falling into place with this tender, unforced connection. When they parted, she pressed her forehead to his, breath unsteady. "I've wanted to do that for a while." Lucas's mouth curved into a wry smile. "I didn't want to push, especially with everything you've been through. But yes, I've wanted this too." They lingered like that, holding on to each other in the hush of the moment. Outside, distant foghorns and soft city sounds underscored the life stirring beyond their private bubble of peace. Zoe felt tears prick her eyes, not of sadness, but of profound relief. All her struggles with Mark, the terror of running along that highway, had led her here to a new sense of freedom shared with someone who saw her truth and stood by it. She let herself savor the simple wonder of being able to embrace this feeling with her whole heart, unburdened by shame or fear. For the first time in a long while, she felt entirely safe in someone's arms, safe, free, and immeasurably alive. The following week brought a rush of practical tasks that reminded Zoe life was more than just romance and new beginnings. It also required a return to everyday responsibilities. She had phone calls with potential clients, email threads with suppliers, and follow-ups regarding Mark's ongoing legal quagmire. Each step demanded a grounded, focused version of herself. A bright, midweek morning found her at a bustling design conference in downtown San Francisco, a networking event Chloe had convinced her to attend. Tall banners advertised sustainable building materials and cutting-edge interior solutions. Zoe had initially felt a coil of anxiety at the prospect of facing so many industry professionals. She couldn't help recalling how easily Mark had swayed influential people against her. But stepping into the airy conference hall, she found that many recognized her recent bold move in exposing Mark. While some acquaintances offered cautious sympathy, others displayed genuine respect. A few even expressed interest in Sterling designs, curious about the woman who had successfully stood up to a powerful manipulator. Late in the afternoon, Chloe and Zoe stood near a modern furniture exhibit, sipping cold, sparkling water. Chloe flashed a grin. "Told you this would be worth it. Two people just asked if you're booking new projects, right?" Zoe nodded, adjusting the lanyard around her neck. "Yes, I'm a little overwhelmed, but in a good way. I guess Mark's scandal ironically gave me publicity." Chloe's eyes softened. "People admire a survivor's story, but remember, you earned their respect with your actual talent, Zoe. Never forget that." They drifted toward a networking lounge, filled with colleagues chatting among sleek sofas. A few recognized Chloe from past events, greeting her warmly, which opened doors for Zoe to introduce Sterling Designs. She handed out business cards, modest, newly printed ones. It felt simultaneously surreal and exhilarating to proclaim she was a small business owner free from Mark's shadow. An hour later, Lucas arrived, having wrapped up a meeting across town. He joined Zoe by a sculptural light fixture display, eyes glinting with pride. "Seems like you're the star here," he teased, noticing the stack of business cards already handed out. Zoe blushed. "I'm just glad people are treating me normally. For a while, I worried they'd see me as just that runaway bride or some scandal magnet, but they seemed genuinely curious about my work." Lucas nodded, scanning the vibrant conference floor. "This is what you do best. Connecting, designing, inspiring. It's good to see you thriving." They spent the next hour weaving through various booths together. When someone recognized Lucas, calling out his name, Zoe felt a flicker of apprehension, recalling rumors about Mark's old feud with him. But the conversation stayed polite. People asked about upcoming innovations at Harper Innovations, not about messy personal dramas. It confirmed, in a small but significant way, that Mark's hold was loosening on both their lives. Near the day's end, Zoe found herself perched on a high stool, looking through brochures she'd gathered. Chloe sidled up, offering a playful nudge. "So, you and Lucas, huh?" she said, wiggling her eyebrows. "I've seen the way you two look at each other." Heat flooded Zoe's cheeks. Yes, we've gotten closer." She paused, reflecting on the blossoming intimacy. "He makes me feel respected, and we connect on so many levels. After everything, it's nice to trust someone again." Chloe smiled wide. "That's all I wanted for you. Just be happy, Zoe. You deserve it." Later, as the conference wound down, Zoe and Lucas stepped outside into the crisp evening air. The city skyline glowed, cars zipped along the streets in rush-hour fervor. She gripped the handle of her rolling bag filled with design materials. Lucas offered to help, and she let him, linking her arm with his as they strolled. The busy sidewalks parted around them, passers-by immersed in their own worlds. Zoe took a deep breath, absorbing the bustling life that reminded her she was firmly rooted in reality. She was no longer that woman trapped in terror, nor was she reliant on the illusions Mark once spun. Instead, she was a professional designer forging new connections, a friend to Chloe and Sarah who never wavered, and a partner, tentatively, but wholeheartedly, to Lucas Harper, who had shown her that genuine support and affection could be real. Stepping into the waiting rideshare, Zoey felt the subtle hum of anticipation for whatever tomorrow held. If this was the real world, she was ready to embrace it fully, armed with her truth and a future that belonged to no one but herself. It was a crisp weekend morning when Zoey arrived at a community center in the heart of San Francisco. A contact from her college days had invited her to speak at a local support group for women who'd experienced manipulative or emotionally abusive relationships. Standing outside the modest brick building, Zoey felt the flutter of nerves return. Speaking at a design conference was one thing. This was far more personal. Sarah had come along for moral support, and they found their way to a room in the back. The space was simple, a circle of folding chairs, a coffee table with plastic cups and a pitcher of water, and a few motivational posters on the walls. About a dozen women sat quietly, talking in hushed tones. The group leader, Carla, a slender woman with kind eyes, greeted Zoey. "Thanks for doing this. Your story has circulated online, especially your courage in confronting Mark Thompson. I think it'll resonate with the women here." Zoey managed a grateful nod. Stepping into the circle, she took a seat. Her heart pounded with the knowledge that these people sought hope in real, tangible ways, not just headlines or dramatic stories. After a brief introduction, Carla invited Zoey to share whatever felt comfortable. Zoey wet her lips, fingers tangling in her lap. "Hi, I'm Zoey Sterling," she began softly. "I'm 33, an interior architect, and a few weeks ago, I was supposed to marry a man named Mark." She paused, letting the women see the vulnerability in her face. "He turned out to be someone who manipulated me for financial gain, someone who isolated me from my own instincts and wore down my self-esteem. I only realized the truth on my wedding day." All eyes were on her. A few women nodded sympathetically. Zoey could feel her throat tightening with emotion, but she pressed on. She explained how Mark's controlling nature had crept into her daily life, making her doubt her own judgment. She recalled the terror of discovering his plan and the desperate flight down a coastal highway. But she also highlighted the turning point, accepting help from Lucas, facing Mark's smear campaign, and taking legal action. When she finished, the room remained silent for a moment. Then a woman raised her hand, tears brimming in her eyes. "How did you find the strength to leave? I'm terrified of what my partner might do if I walk away." Zoey's voice shook, recalling the fear she'd lived with. "I won't lie, it was terrifying. But I realized staying would destroy me. The moment I fully accepted that he didn't love me, that I was just a pawn, was the moment I couldn't pretend anymore. That terror became a push to save myself." Another woman asked how Zoey handled guilt and shame. Zoey responded that for a while she blamed herself for not seeing the signs. But therapy, supportive friends like Chloe and Sarah, and her determination to rebuild her career had gradually replaced that shame with self-compassion. "You have to forgive yourself for what you didn't know or couldn't do at the time," she said, her voice gentle but resolute. Toward the end of the session, Carla invited any woman who felt comfortable to share her own experience. As each spoke, Zoey recognized echoes of her own journey, disbelief, betrayal, and the painful realization that someone they trusted had weaponized love. In that circle, tears were shed, but no one was judged. It was a shared space of understanding, and Zoey sensed the raw courage in each story. When the meeting wrapped, Zoey lingered, answering a few lingering questions. Before leaving, Carla pulled her aside. "You helped them see it's possible to stand up, to move forward," she said, her tone thick with gratitude. Sometimes all people need is a living example. Sarah and Zoe walked out into the bright afternoon. The air tasted hopeful. Zoe felt lighter, like she'd done something that mattered beyond her personal battle with Mark. "That was intense," she confessed, releasing a shaky breath. "But if I can help even one person break free sooner, it's worth it." Sarah squeezed her arm in silent affirmation. They navigated the busy sidewalk, and Zoe realized her voice, once silenced by fear, now had purpose. She wasn't just escaping Mark's shadow, she was lighting a path for others too. As she and Sarah headed toward the car, Zoe felt a deep gratitude bloom in her heart. She was sowing the seeds of a future not only for herself, but for anyone who needed hope that real freedom and genuine connections were possible, even after profound betrayal. On a late afternoon in Sausalito, the guest house windows glowed with warm light, reflecting a sky streaked with pink and gold. Inside, Zoe was bent over a makeshift drafting table, measuring and sketching with the intense focus that always overtook her when creativity flowed. Swatches of fabric, samples of tile, and pencil sketches for Mrs. Henderson's project lay scattered around her. Music played softly in the background. At the sound of a gentle knock, she looked up to see Lucas standing in the open doorway. "Mind if I come in?" he asked, holding 2 steaming mugs. She beamed, gesturing for him to enter. "Coffee break. Perfect timing. My brain was about to short-circuit." He set a mug next to her. "Look at all this," he remarked, scanning the designs. "You're building a whole new vision here. It's amazing." Zoe blushed. "Mrs. Henderson wants a complete redesign. Living room, kitchen, even a garden deck. I'm excited, but it's a big job for Sterling Design's first major project. I want it to be flawless." Lucas sipped his coffee, then placed a small envelope on her drafting table. "I got this in the mail today. Figured it might interest you." Her brow furrowed as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from Dr. Sharma's office referencing a court update. Skimming it, she discovered that Mark had been officially charged with multiple counts of fraud. Additional details confirmed that he'd agreed to certain plea terms, effectively ending his public denials. Zoe felt an odd mixture of relief and finality settle in her stomach. "So he's finally facing real legal consequences," she murmured. "No more indefinite delays." Lucas nodded, eyes reflecting understanding. "He's cornered. This letter means the case against him is strong enough that he's done fighting it. You're free from his interference. Legally, financially, emotionally, it's over." She took a moment to let that sink in. For so long, Mark had been an ominous force in her life. Now, with his guilt recognized, the shadows he cast could finally disperse. Her gaze flicked to Lucas, gratitude welling in her eyes. "I don't think I'd have made it here without you. And not just you, Sarah, Chloe, Dr. Sharma, but especially you." Lucas set his mug down, moving closer. "You did the hardest work, deciding to confront him, rebuilding your life. I just walked beside you." Zoe slipped her arms around his waist, resting her cheek against his chest. "Still, you changed everything when you stopped on that highway." He held her gently, the hum of closeness filling the room. After a moment, she pulled back and gestured toward the scattered design plans. "You know, I've been thinking I could really use a proper studio space, something separate from the guest house, a permanent place to live and work." A playful spark lit Lucas's eyes. "I might know a guy with some real estate leads." Then his expression turned earnest. "But only if you want my help." She smiled at his sensitivity. Before Mark, she might have interpreted a man's involvement in her affairs as controlling. Now, she trusted herself and Lucas enough to see it as partnership. "I do want your help," she said softly, "but I want to take the lead. This is my venture." He nodded, understanding shining in his gaze. "Then let's find you a perfect spot. A place you can shape into your dream studio, and maybe a home you design for yourself." Her heartbeat fluttered at the possibility, designing her own home, weaving her identity into the walls and fixtures, the color schemes and layouts, such a stark contrast to living under Mark's illusions. "That sounds incredible." They lingered there, discussing floor plans, possible neighborhoods, and how she'd expand Sterling designs. A subtle excitement coursed through them both. Zoe realized she was doing exactly what she once dreamed of, crafting not just an interior design plan, but a life that reflected her authenticity and newfound confidence. Eventually, she guided Lucas to a large sheet of blank paper on the drafting table. "Let's do a rough brainstorm," she suggested, picking up a pencil. "I can show you how I envision the open living area, maybe with big windows overlooking the bay." Together, they sketched, laughed, and dreamed. Outside, the sun dipped lower, painting the horizon with fiery hues that glowed through the glass. Zoe felt a soft ache of joy in her chest. The woman who had once fled down a lonely highway in terror now stood here, sculpting her own future. With each pencil stroke, she laid the foundation for a home untainted by fear, a place to welcome love, creativity, and honest connections. As evening embraced Sausalito, she and Lucas stepped back to admire their rough outline. It was just a draft, rough around the edges, but like her life now, it was full of promise and free of lies. Zoe pressed her head to Lucas's shoulder, letting contentment envelop her. A new horizon stretched out before her, bright, uncertain, and entirely her own. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.